guys, my name is Chelsea and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, we have my June wrap-up. So I participated in 2 readathons in the month of June. One was the Make Your Myth Taker readathon that was hosted by Ashley from A Frolic Through Fiction, and the second one was the Olympic Games readathon hosted by Ishi from Ishi Time. I am very happy with how many books I did end up reading throughout the month. I read 14 total books. I did have 16 books actually on my TBR for both of those readathons, and I just quite, almost didn't make it there. But otherwise, it was a pretty good reading month. And I guess we're just going to jump into the first books I read. The first book I actually did read in the month of June was Burn Our Bodies Down by Rory Power. This is an e-arc that I did receive from NetGalley, and this book is going to be coming out on July 7th. I read this for actually both readathons for the prompt, which was basically the same of both readathons, the prompt of not knowing much about a book. I did know what this book was, sort of about when I requested it. I have not read any other Rory Power, even though I do have Wilder Girls on my shelves, but by the time I ended up reading the book, I didn't know what it was about, so definitely fit for that prompt. But basically this is a book that follows our main character of Margot, who lives with her mother, doesn't have the best relationship with her, doesn't really realize that she still has family that's alive, and she ends up finding out that she does still have a grandmother, and she goes to that small town where her grandmother lives, and her grandmother runs a farm, and then it's a mystery thriller horror thing from there. I really don't know how to describe this book, and I actually gave this book 3 stars. This is one of those stories that I wasn't too sure how I felt about it, even starting it right away. The writing style for me was vague, and I say that in such a way that it wasn't too flowery, it wasn't too blunt, but when Margot would sort of talk about conversations with her mother or conversations with her grandmother, I didn't fully understand what was going on. The way that they talked was just very in circles around the main idea, and then I didn't think it was all that creepy or thrillery or horror-y. Lovely adjectives, aren't they? But the main mystery started about, I want to say, I think it was 20% of the way through the book, and I sort of guessed how it was going to end. However, they didn't really give us the why. We got this is what happened and this is what the reveal was, but we never got an explanation, and so for me, I was a little bit lost. It wasn't necessarily bad, and I'm very curious to see what other people think if they have read Wilder Girls, because that book was also very polarizing, with people either loved it or hated it. And so I don't know if this is going to be the same sort of book where some people are just going to love the way it was written and the story, and then some people aren't. One other thing is I do see a lot of people saying it's LGBTQ, because I know Wilder Girls is, and there was maybe one line that implied that Margot could have been into girls. It wasn't explicitly stated, at least in my opinion, and there was no romance in this book. So if you're going into it wanting an LGBTQ forward book, I don't think this one is it. The next book that I read in June was Isola Volume 1 by Brendan Fletcher and Carl Kerschel. This was for the Make Your Myth Taker prompt of having a queen main character, which might be a little surprised for you guys to find out, but the tiger one is our queen main character. Basically, this book is happening after there was a curse onto our queen, whose name is Olwen, and our guard captain of Rook here wants to try to reverse the curse. I don't know why that was so hard for me to think of. So they are trying to find a like mythical island of Isola, which is like I think the island of the dead. We don't get a whole bunch of resolution here or a whole bunch of explanation for exactly what is going on. However, the story, like the art style here, is absolutely gorgeous. I really loved, I want to say, the relationship between the Queen and Rook. We don't get a whole lot of it, but we definitely get to see them after the curse, with Rook sort of taking on the main burden of trying to get them to Isola. But we do get a little bit of flashbacks as well, and it does seem like there might have been a romantic relationship between these two women, so I'm very excited to see more in this series. I gave this 4 stars because I want to know more. I love the art style so much, but there are still questions that I have. So it wasn't a full 5 stars. I should also just show you because, like I said, the art style is gorgeous. I mean, I don't know if you guys are gonna be able to tell too much, but like there was a blue as an overall theme. And some of the pages in here, actually I think the one I showed you was a good indication, but a lot of the pages in here don't have dialogue in it. Yeah. The page I showed you is a good indication. So it was very quick to read, very atmospheric, very visual, and I really did enjoy it, but I have so many questions that I couldn't give it a 5 star. The next book I read was The Gospel of Loki by Joanne M. Harris. This was for a book with a foiled cover for the Make Your Myth Taker readathon, and this was, I think, the biggest disappointment. No. There were 2 disappointments this month. I think the other one was a slightly worse book. This one might have been the biggest disappointment though, because I've had this on my shelves for years. And I have read Rune Marks by this author, which was a YA Norse mythology type of book. Loved that. But this is an adult fantasy Norse mythology book that is written from Loki's perspective. I had a really hard time getting through this one. This one is less than 300 pages. This one's like 270 something pages. And I was bored. Most of this book is told through Loki's narration, and we don't even actually get dialogue in this book until like page 19, and even then most of this is narration from Loki. It was retellings of Norse mythology from his perspective, and a lot of them I had heard before. It just wasn't intriguing. Even the Ragnarok stuff at the end, because they tell you at the beginning that it's going to go through Ragnarok, I was bored. I really wanted to DNF this, except for the fact that it had taken me like days to even get to the halfway point, and I was just like, no, I'm going to complete it. So I actually ended up reading at least half of this on audiobook. Now, I will say the narrator for this book on audiobook was amazing. I absolutely loved him narrating the book, but I hated the actual book. I was very disappointed. I gave this 2 stars because I usually reserve my 1 stars for DNFs, and I don't think it was necessarily horrible. Some people might love this, but it was definitely not what I was expecting and not what I was looking for. Then I read Honor Among Thieves by Rachel Kane and Anne Aguirre. This is the first book in the Honors series, and this is a YA sci-fi. I read this for the prompt of having royal colors on the cover for the Make Your Myth Taker readathon, which was like red, purple, gold, potentially. I don't remember fully, but it was purple is what I chose. And this is a book that I gave 4 out of 5 stars. So this follows our main character of Zara, who used to live in, I think it was New Detroit, but she didn't like some of the expectations that were placed on her in that sort of higher society level. So at the beginning of this book, she is living more like on the streets and gets herself into some trouble, and while she is trying to get out of that trouble, she is picked for the honors program, which is a space program. It is a space program, but it's sort of like a relationship between the humans and the Leviathan, which is an alien species that had come to Earth a few decades before and basically helped the Earth and the humans survive so that they didn't have to go through like ruining their planet and the wars and everything. And the Leviathan are gigantic aliens, and they're basically like their ships. So in the honors program, they go through the training and everything, but then they get to go and live for a year on the Leviathan, or in the Leviathan, and it's like a cultural exchange of ideas and information. However, there is more to it than that as you get through when you read this book. I did enjoy this pretty well. I had some issues connecting with Nadim, which is the Leviathan that Zara is on, but I feel like it is mostly just because it wasn't a human or humanoid character. I have read some books that have alien point of views, and some of them I feel are very easy to connect with, but this one, I don't know. I just did not connect with that character very much, and I found the second half a little bit slow, even though there was supposed to be some action. However, I really did enjoy the sort of cliffhanger ending. I mean, they answered enough questions that I don't consider it a like bad cliffhanger, but they left enough open that I really do want to know what happens in the rest of the series. This is another book slash series that I have heard has LGBTQ elements. However, there was nothing to show that in this book, so I did double check the second book in the series, and a lot of people shelve it as LGBTQ that way as well, so I'm just assuming whatever relationship is going to happen just did not happen in this book yet. Then I read Geekerella by Ashley Poston. This was for, again, the Make Your Myth Taker readathon. We're going through that one for a little while. And this was for the prompt of reading a book about books or about stories. And this is a Cinderella retelling based around a geeky fandom convention. What is it? Starfield. I knew it wasn't Star Wars or Star Trek. It feels more like a Star Trek-y fandom. However, in this world, Star Trek and Star Wars are actual fandoms. I did like the fandom droppings that we had in here. It's almost like name droppings, but like fandom drops in here that our author obviously left us with. Our main character of Danielle, or Elle, is very versed in like fandom stuff, especially Starfield, and I just really, really enjoyed that aspect. I gave this a 4 stars, and it's mostly because I felt, even though it is a YA contemporary romance, I felt things moved a little bit quickly. Our two main characters, and the point of view does switch between them, text each other, not realizing who each other is. I liked how Elle connected with Darian, who is our guy main character. She didn't fall in love right away, but Darian started speaking really, really quickly about liking her without knowing who she was, without her knowing who he was, and it wasn't even necessarily that it happened too quickly and it was like insta-love or anything like that. I think it was more just the fact that it was not a trope that I necessarily liked. The fact that he was really into not knowing who she was because he's an actor. It was just a little bit off for me, but the writing style was really cute, the story was cute, and I do want to continue with this series as well. Ashley Poston does have a couple more like companion novels in this series that retell fairy tales in fandom settings. And because I forgot I was doing this, I have been doing the 52 reading challenges cards this year. Honor Among Thieves was for a book written by more than one author, and Geekerella was for a book based on a fairy tale, mythology, or folklore retelling or variation, so a retelling of Cinderella. Then the next book I read was Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. This one I also gave 4 stars. I feel like I gave a lot of books 4 stars this month, which is not a bad thing, but it almost feels slightly slumpy in my reading month because of the fact that everything was good, but not like that extra push into a 5 stars. So I didn't even notice that until I got a little bit further in the month, but I gave a lot of things 4 stars. But this is another YA sci-fi that I also did for the Make Your Myth Taker, and I believe this one was for the highest rated book on my TBR, and it was the highest rated on my Goodreads, as long as it wasn't a sequel to stuff I hadn't read before. And I did really enjoy this book. This follows our main character, Spensa, who wants to become a pilot, basically. She lives on this planet that all of the people are basically hiding from an alien species that is trying to eradicate them, and they have pilots that basically are sort of like their elite and fight off the alien species. And her father used to be a pilot. During one of the battles when she was a child, he was branded a coward, and so that had followed her around for the rest of her life up until she was able to get into the flight school. I really enjoyed Spensa as our main character. I loved the side characters. This one is not an easy book insofar as the fact that there are character deaths in here. So while I do feel like the writing style and this story is easy to read and really fun and, you know, cool to get into, keep that in mind. There are some dark aspects in here. And then the reason it was not a 5 stars for me personally is that we do have quite a few like battles, like when the pilots go up and fight off the alien spaceships, and for whatever reason, every single time except for the very last battle, I believe, everything just felt slow. I didn't really find myself drawn into the action like I would in almost any other action scene in other books. I don't quite know what it was because I loved the writing in here in basically every other instance, but the actual battles didn't quite work. Then I read Die Volume 1, Fantasy Heartbreaker, and later in the month I read Die Volume 2, Split the Party. These are both by Kieran Gillen. I'm going to talk about them both at the same time, only because this is a sequel, and I did read this near the very end of the month, but I did read them both. The first one I read for the Make Your Myth Taker challenge of reading a 5-star prediction. So I have rated every single Kieran Gillen graphic novel that I have read a 4 or 5 stars. I just absolutely love these comic bind-ups. I know I said graphic novel, I know the difference, but I love his work, and so I thought it was an easy pick to say, I think these are going to be 5 stars for me. They both ended up being 4 stars. The art style was not quite to my liking. It's just a little bit painterly. I don't know if that's exactly how I want to describe it. Also, a little bit gory. I'm trying to find something that is a little easier for you guys to see on here. Lots of dark colors and reds, and it's just all a little bit, I don't know how to describe that very well. It's not as crisp and clean as I would like, but I don't think that was in detriment to this work. However, the main concept of this book is that 6 teens ended up sucked into a D&D game, so almost like Jumanji-ish, and then after I think it was a few years, 5 of them came back. Then once they had turned 30 something, the 5 of them get sucked back into the game after they had had their own lives, marriages, divorces, kids, and the 6th boy is actually still in the game playing the game. And I thought that concept was very interesting. I liked some of the characters a lot. One of our main characters is named Ash in this fantasy world, but in the real world, he goes by Dominic. But in this fantasy world, she goes by Ash. So they haven't explained what is the correct pronoun for her, because it almost sounds like once they came back from this fantasy world, he wanted to be Dominic so much more because it was not connected to this world. I know it's not a big deal, but one of the other characters in the first volume did ask her about that, and she brushed it off. So I don't know if we're gonna get into that again or not. I don't know when this stopped recording. I really don't. Let me just, I guess, quickly overview this again, and I'll try and edit it. I really liked some aspects of this, and that's why I gave them both 4 stars. I really did like some of the characters, and I am intrigued to see where this is going to go. However, I didn't understand a lot. I really do want to read more in this series because I'm very curious about it. It wasn't a 3 because I was sucked into the story the whole time, but I have questions. Then the last book that I read for the Make Your Myth Taker Readathon is The Art of Being Normal by Lisa Williamson. So this is the other book that I was talking about being disappointing, and I guess it's not necessarily disappointing because I did not know what I was getting into when I started reading this. I've had it on my TBR for a few years now. All I really knew was that it was about a trans character, and the reason I remember that is because the cover here on the hardcover has a rainbow on the cover. However, I think when they did the paperback, they changed the flag because this is the wrong flag. They changed it to the trans flag. So I know, that's all I knew really going into this. This was a book that was picked for a randomization of my TBR, so this is a completely random book. I gave this 2 stars. I feel like I would have given it 3 because of the writing style, the story. It was okay, nothing, you know, superb. However, I had some really big issues with this book. I'm gonna try and give you guys the summary of them now. I'm gonna leave the vlog that I vlogged for this down below because I definitely went into reasons why I did not support this book, like this book, and I'm gonna try not to give too many spoilers. However, I don't think I can go into why I didn't like this book very much unless I do give spoilers, so I'll put spoilers. Baby's awake. Hi, baby. I'll put the word spoilers at the bottom until I'm done. But basically, this is a book that follows Kate, who at the beginning of the story, I guess, okay, through the whole story, she is a trans girl. However, she has not come out yet. And this is a book by a Not Own Voices author, and they use Kate's dead name throughout the story. And this is a coming out story, figuring out who you are. And I, one, did not like that, especially now that I know, like, who Kate is as a person by reading this book. I wouldn't want to use her dead name. But that's what's in the summary too, by the way. Then we have the point of view of Leo, who for most of the book, I had no idea why he was in this book. He sort of knows Kate, he's the new kid in school, but like there's no romance. There's not even really a friendship through most of it. And it comes out a little over halfway through this book that he is also trans. And the thing is, they use it as sort of an excuse as to why he is more of a boy than Kate is as a girl, because he has already transitioned, which is another big ol' issue. Then at some point, 3/4 of the way through or so, Kate tells Leo that she is a girl, and Leo, you know, should understand this because Leo went through the whole process as a boy. However, Leo keeps, 1, dead naming Kate, 2, misgendering Kate, even when they are alone with each other and nobody else is around. So it's not like they're even trying to hide who Kate is. Kate's best friends know as well. I think it's mostly just her parents don't know. So yes, I had some big issues. I'm trying to look. I want to say that's the major ones. But again, I will leave the link to the vlog down below in case you want to know, like, if there's anything else that I might have missed right now. But yeah, 2 stars. I'm really, because I keep getting more and more mad, and each time I have to think about this and the ways that it's just not doing it, I do feel like this might end up being a 1 star, because again, if it was Own Voices without those issues, the way it was written would be a 3 stars, just middle of the road for me. Also, I read this in 1 day, 1 sitting. That's the only reason I finished this book. But yeah, so I'm saying 2 because that's what I said before, but I really do feel like over time it's slowly definitely going into 1 star territory. So I am going to address this because it would bug me just a little bit. I am in a new outfit. It is another day, just the next day. Presley did not have very good naps yesterday, and so he was very cranky throughout this filming periphery, I want to say, because it wasn't necessarily during filming. I filmed most of the first part while he was sleeping, but I was not able to finish. So we still have some books over here, and we're gonna finish this. The next one I read was for the Olympic Games readathon, and this was for a book with a beautiful cover. I really enjoy this art style and this artist, so obviously I had to include it. This is For Goodness Sake, Volume 1 by Kaylin Smith. I've actually read some other stuff that Kaylin Smith has done, like she did the Plume series, which I absolutely loved. It's like a fantasy western, and it was great. She does art and story here, and I gave this 5 stars. I just really enjoyed it. It's very short, like 98-ish pages, I want to say it is, but it follows Thatcher, who is a human cursed to be a demon. So if anybody is like scared or intimidated by him, he turns more demonish, like his horns grow longer, his skin turns redder, his eyes get really black. And then we have Rain Waters, who is our hippie in a school bus, who basically finds him and helps him out of a scrape, and then sort of takes it upon herself to try to teach him to be nicer to people. This is definitely more of a character-driven story, but I absolutely loved it. I love the art style. That was the whole reason I picked Kaylin Smith's work up in Plume. Loved that. Love this. Can't wait for more in the series. And then this one did also have a card, and it was to read a graphic novel. I have read a few this month. I mean, some of them are comic bind-ups, but I consider it basically the same category for stuff like this. However, this one is like a graphic novel. They are putting them out in volumes, but it's not a ton of issues of comics bound up together. So then I read A Princess in Theory by Alyssa Cole. This is a contemporary romance about Naledi, who is a grad student, and then Prince Thabiso, who is a prince from a country in Africa. Naledi had been receiving emails saying, "You have been betrothed to a prince in Africa," and obviously it sounds like a scam email, so she completely disregards it, but it's basically their romance of how they meet and everything like that. I gave this 3.5 stars. I know some people absolutely love this, and I mostly had an issue with how the book ended. It got to a point where they had added some like action and drama into the story near the end, and that just felt like it wrapped up way too quickly for the story, and so that was a little bit annoying. I also don't think Prince Thabiso is my type of guy that I want to read in romance, like the romantic interest. He in this story is, like I mentioned before, a prince, but when he goes and meets Naledi, he ends up being mistaken for like a commoner, a waiter, and he lies to her about that, who he is, for longer than I would have liked. I don't mind the whole miscommunication at the very beginning of a story, but like as you're getting into feelings, you should change that up a little bit. Now, I absolutely loved Naledi though. I loved her character. I loved seeing how she had to deal with postdocs and everything like this in her grad program, and her being a woman in STEM. I loved her. But there were just some issues with the story that made me give it 3.5 stars, but I really do want to read more of Alyssa Cole's work. Then I read Nevernight by Jay Kristoff. This is a adult fantasy that I gave 4 stars. This is another one that I feel like could have almost been a 5 stars. Like I was really wanting it to be a 5 stars, but that slumpiness that I was talking about before, I've gotten a lot of 4 stars that I just really wish I had been able to push up higher, and this was one of them. I really did enjoy this story. I loved our characters in here, especially Mia, and that was something that I think was done really well. The first, I think it's about a third of the first book of the story. There's like 3 books in the book, 3 books in the novel. The first book of the story, I did not like the setup of that as much because every chapter started with a flashback to when Mia was little, and I felt it took me out of the progression of the story. I really just wanted to get on with the continuing action. Once we got to book 2 and got more towards the like assassin school that she was basically going to be at, then I really enjoyed the journey. I know I didn't really say what this was about, but it's about Mia, who wants to take revenge on the people that had basically murdered her father after he had been found wanting to cause a political, like, rising. And so she goes to an assassin school to sort of learn how to be an assassin. You know, assassin school. But yeah, I really loved that setting. This is very dark. They don't pull any punches, which I really did appreciate. So there are character deaths in here, obviously, as well, because nothing is going to stay happy forever in this world. I do have some questions about this world and what's going to happen in the rest of the books. Like, I do really want to continue with the series. I did also like that there are footnotes here. I don't feel like they were necessary all the time, but there is obviously another entity, another person writing this story, and their characterization comes out in the footnotes, so I'm very, very curious about that. And then I did want to say, I did talk about this in a vlog, so I will leave that link down below because I definitely go into this and my issues with it in more detail, why it wasn't a 4 stars. But there are some issues in here that I had. I know some people have an issue with a minor, a 16-year-old having sex and there being sex scenes. I personally didn't mind that too much. Some people have an issue with the fact that Mia gets a boob job. I didn't mind that too much because it's not a boob job. There is a full reason about their society and women in their society of why that was done. And again, I didn't mind that too much. The thing that I definitely did mind is that there are a couple sorcerai at the assassin school, which the sorcerai are like the people that can use magic, and there's only a couple that we actually see in here, and it's mostly them. But they are a brother-sister duo, and it is very blatantly explained that they have an incestuous relationship, but then they are also talked about multiple times as being grotesque and this kind of thing. And one of it is because they do seem very, very creepy, potentially evil, I mean, assassin school, but they are also talked about a few times as also being albino, and that is part of the reason they're seen as grotesque, not just the fact that like one of them is disfigured. But those were my major issues. Again, I went into them more in the vlog. Then I read an advanced reader copy of Love Me, Love Me Not Volume 3 by Io Sakisaka. This book will be coming out on July 7th. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I have really been enjoying this series. This is the same author that does Aoharu Ride, which I've only read the first couple books, but like love them, 5 out of 5 stars. And this series follows Akari and Yuna, 2 girls who meet in the first book and end up forming a friendship. They are very different girls in their views of like life, friendship, love, and so I loved the fact that they were able to really be friends. This volume, number 3, similar to volume 2 when I reviewed that one, deals a little bit more with their crushes on their respective boys that are sort of in the volumes, and they're both sort of dealing with unrequited crushes right now. I don't mind that too much. This is like a coming of age shoujo manga, but I personally really, really enjoyed the relationship, like the friendship between the 2 girls, and that is done more in this volume than volume 2, but I feel like it has been put on the back burner a little bit, and that's why it's not a 5 stars. I still really enjoy this series though, so definitely consider picking it up if you like the coming of age shoujo manga type of books. And then finally, I read Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall. This is another e-arc for a book that is coming out on July 7th. I think all of my NetGalley ones I read this month are coming out on July 7th. I don't quite know why, but that's what they are. And this one follows our main character of Luke, who is sort of famous by proxy. His father is a retired musician. He had gone through like rehab and stuff like that and is trying to make a comeback, and because of that, Luke is spotted in the tabloids quite often doing things that I guess would not be considered proper. So like he stumbles out of a bar, trips in the street, but they label him as being like very, very drunk, maybe an alcoholic, that kind of stuff. So he works at a charity where he does like the fundraiser for them, and his boss puts out an ultimatum a pretty homophobic ultimatum, but basically you need to find yourself a respectable boyfriend and become the good gay so that people will come back to the charity ball and do the fundraising event. I gave this book 5 stars. Now, I do want to specify that that sort of boss dynamic that I was talking about, I really did not like when I first started reading the book. I was very like, really? Are we really going there? However, Luke addresses it right away. Anytime anybody says anything that could definitely be microaggressions for homophobia, that kind of stuff, it is definitely dealt with, which I appreciated. I also want to just specify this because I know I was confused for most of this book and I wasn't sure how to feel about it. The author's name is Alexis Hall, and Alexis is a very, very common girl name. This is a male writer and it's an own voices story, so I feel much better about it. Just because I do feel like sometimes women authors fetishize a little bit, and there are some that I have read that I've enjoyed, but I prefer own voices ones if at all possible. I also wasn't entirely too sure about Luke's character at first. He is very pessimistic in his views on people viewing him because of like the tabloids. However, he ends up meeting up with a friend of a friend named Oliver, who also needs a fake boyfriend, and the fake dating trope commences. So like I said, I gave this 5 stars. I feel like most of my issues with like Luke, his boss, that kind of stuff were definitely at the beginning, less than a third, because I want to say by the time it got to 30%, because I did read this as an ebook, it eventually just like took off. Like I devoured it. I absolutely loved it. I loved Oliver as a character. I loved their relationship because I believe Luke is late 20s in this book, so it's definitely like a adult romance. I want to say it might even not be new adult anymore. I think it's adult. But they are, you know, slightly older than the typical age that I feel like I've been seeing lately in romance, and they talk about their issues. There's no major miscommunication. There was a part that I had talked about in the vlog. This is the same vlog from the Nevernight one, so like again, it'll be linked down below. But there was a part where there could have been a miscommunication and it was resolved within like that night. So I was just very, very happy with the way it was written. I loved some of the characters. Some of it was a little bit cheesy and that kind of stuff as well, but I actually really love this book. I was not expecting to love it as much as I did when I first started out because of just like those little things, but I really, really enjoyed it. I think people definitely are gonna need to pick this one up. And that is actually it for June. We finally got through it. If you guys liked this video, please give a thumbs up to let me know. Subscribe to this channel if you would like to see more videos. I have videos up Mondays, Thursdays, and sometimes Saturdays, so I will see you then. Bye.